Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's do some announcements. Learning announcements. Year of Learning sponsored by Julie and Boris Kagan to commemorate the year inside of Julie's father, Yusuf Ben Mato. A month of learning sponsored by Annette and Jerry Cranston to commemorate the year inside of Annette's parents, Genya and Joseph Zimmer, Greene Leah, the parents, and Yosef and Sarah Pesach. And don't forget, tomorrow we have a bagels and lox breakfast. If you made a reservation, we'll see you tomorrow. And don't forget, Wednesday, you still can make a reservation for Wednesday. It's the NATEP birthday club for Thomas. And then next week on Sunday, we have the NATEP America 250 with Rabbi Greene giving a on that day. So we have a lot going on, so make your reservations.
Good morning. Several times a day, we recite the paragraphs of Shema, and it includes the halachos about tzitzis. Al kanfeidem dorosnu v'nosnu al tzitzis. You have to, on a four-corded garments, you have to put on these fringes, and it also has to have a pasil techeles. What is a pasil techeles? One of the strings should be techeles.
Blue.
So there's a whole discussion in the fourth parak of Maseches Menachos that tries to define what techeles is and where it comes from. Techeles is a color, indigo blue or cerulean blue, perhaps, which is fine. You wear the blue string among the various other strings on your tzitzis, and it should remind you of the sky, of heaven, of God, etc., etc. But where does this dye come from? So the Gemara tells us it comes from a certain mollusk known as the chilazon. Doesn't exactly define what the chilazon is. It's a certain sea creature. And the dye that's extracted from it while it's alive from a certain gland makes this particular color. Not only that, but this chilazon, this sea creature, whatever it is, snail or whatever, is very rare. It comes up once every 70 years, Gemara says, which is a bit of an exaggeration, perhaps. It could refer to that very often you have on the beaches of Israel, northern Israel, it may be every once in a while, a large number of these things may wash up on the shore. But this is one of the mysteries of Jewish life, that shortly after the early Talmudic period, probably after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed even, we lost the Masorah as to exactly what this chilazon is. And it kind of disappeared. Now we know from other sources, from Greek and Roman sources, that this royal blue color, it's called royal blue because it was used to decorate the garments of royalty. If you look, the only time you have this in Megillas Esther describing all of the Achashverosh's wealth and so forth, those things are there as well. We, of course, consider ourselves royalty. I mean, we're the Jewish people, we're God's select. Therefore, we wear this in our garments or the fringes on our garments. It disappeared. And after a while, the technology of making this dye also disappeared because you couldn't find the particular sea creature, mollusk, squid, whatever it may have been, to do it. And I would say shortly after the Churban Beis Hamikdash, I mean, we did find in archaeological diggings in the Bar Kokhba caves in the 1st century and in other ancient places, they did find garments that had this blue dye in it, this cerulean blue dye. But we haven't had this for a very, very long time. That's why in generations upon generation, everybody always had white tzitzis on their talis. I mean, that was the norm. Oh, sorry, I got a bloody nose here. That was the norm until 1889. In 1889, the Regina Rebbe, Ershad Herach Leiner, claimed that he discovered chilazon. He claimed it was a certain squid. And he produced a whole bunch of tzitzis from this blue dye from this particular squid. The only problem is that it was not accepted by any of the halachic authorities in that period. As a matter of fact, the Beis Halevi, Yosef Dov Halevi Soloveitchik, after whom Rav Soloveitchik was named, his great-grandfather, came out very much against it. So that never really took off. Maybe a few Rishon Chassidim may have worn it, those blue tzitzis, but it never took on among the halachic world. Along comes Rav Herzog, one of the early chief rabbis of pre-state Israel, and he was a very, very learned individual, and he got a PhD, and his dissertation was on the chilazon. That was his PhD. And in 1913, he proved that the chilazon came from a snail or a mollusk known as, the technical name was Murex trunculus, a certain snail. And you can get the dye from. The only problem was when you squeeze the gland of this particular snail, the dye that came out was purple. That was a problem. Because again, the Murex trunculus, this particular snail, was the chilazon. He proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt. But it was purple. It wasn't blue. Until the 1980s. So I never caught on before that because you never saw people wearing chelas. Until the 1980s, there was a chemist, Otto Eisner, and he discovered that by exposing this dye to sunlight, it turned it from purple to bright blue. And then became the whole industry now of making techeles strings on the tzitzis. Now, a bigger question, and there's a lot of interesting debate about it. However, once we've discovered that the chilazon is the Murex trunculus, and nobody argues it anymore, and once you discover that if you take you squeeze the gland of the living snail and you expose it to sunlight and it turns bright blue. It reminds you of the water and the sky and the heaven, fine. All the drashos are wonderful. Can we halakhically resurrect a lost Masorah? In other words, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, everybody wore tcheles in their tzitzis because they had it available, they knew how to do it, etc. From Churban Beis Hamikdash until the 1980s, there was no reliable tradition or technology to obtain the techeles dye. And the Gemara, by the way, was well aware of it. And the Gemara talks about the fact that there is a similar dye that's available from vegetable, from plants. An indigo plant, you can make a very similar color, but the Gemara cautions you, you can't use that in your tzitzis. It has to be from this Murex trunculus, from the chilazon. So we have two schools of thought. We have those who are of the opinion that the Masorah was discontinued for a long time. However, now that we know how to do it, now we identify the proper thing, why shouldn't we do it? And the major proponent of this particular point of view is Rav Hershel Schachter. Rav Hershel Schachter, the key disciple of Soloveitchik, has popularized this mitzvah, and that's why you see so many young men from yeshiva who wear tcheles in their tzitzis, on the Dalet Kanfos and on the Talis Gadol. It's become a thing. Then we have the next issue. So now there are others who are of the opinion that, listen, you may be able to get the dye from this snail, and you may be able to resurrect a Masorah that was lost for 2,000 years. However, and this is the key thing, my Rebbe didn't wear tcheles. His Rebbe didn't wear tcheles. They certainly knew the halachos. So perhaps we ought not to wear tcheles. And you have that today. It's very widespread among many circles in yeshiva to wear tcheles. Become very popular in Israel as well. On the other hand, there are more traditional points of view that say once the Masorah has been lost, you can't just automatically resurrect a lost tradition just because scientifically it's available. We have to wait till a more appropriate time. I don't know if there's a right or a wrong answer to that question. It's just fascinating that Rav Soloveitchik himself did not wear tcheles. His great-grandfather was opposed to the original Rebbe's, even though it was a wrong mollusk. But Rav Schachter said, we can do it now, let's do it. And it's become very, very widespread. Yes, Howard.
What about the kashrus of the squid?
Well, it's not squid, it's a mollusk.
Or whatever.
We're not eating it. You're not eating it. You're just squeezing out. While it's alive, you squeeze out this inky substance from its glands, and then you expose it to light, and then you dye your tzitzis in it.
How do we know that this was the accident?
Well, again, Rav Herzog's dissertation, if you can probably Google it, he proved very definitively that the chilazon is this snail called Murex trunculus. I got pictures of it here. Actually, it looks like a fish almost, but it's been definitively identified as the chilazon. Again, your question is a very good question because there are some that ask that question. How do we know? It was a Masorah that was lost for so many generations. How do you just resurrect the Masorah? And that's why there are many schools of thought that don't wear tcheles in their tzitzis. A lot of the young men in Israel and from YU popularized this custom of wearing tcheles. There's another issue. Yeah.
Was that color, that tcheles, that dawn, used for anything else, like when they made the Mishkan?
Yes, it was used. It was definitely used in the Mishkan, and it was used in garments of royalty. Regular people didn't. But then again, we are royalty, so therefore we wear tcheles. It also spawned a whole other interesting discussion. How do you tie the tcheles on your tzitzis? In other words, there are at least a dozen different ways of tying your tzitzis. The normal way of doing it is 7, 11. I'm sorry, 7, 8, 11, 13. I think it's right. But to wrap it around. But now there's a dozen different ways of. I mean, not now. There are different shitos. You have this Gaon, Rav Natranoi Gaon, Rav Amram Gaon, Tosfos, the Sefer Achinuch, the Vilna Gaon, the Rambam, and another nusa. There are at least 10 different ways of tying tzitzis with the tchelis showing. And I say, I think I told you a story once before. If you walk into any of the Sforim stores in Meir Sha'arim, and there are people there who are wrapping tzitzis, because it's a skill how to wrap it the right way. And there's a board, and it shows different, I think I passed it out once before here, showing all the different ways to wrap the tzitzis. There's this, there's Shiur going, or Natranoi going, the Rambam, the Chinuch, Ra. At the very end, it says Rav Shechter. He had a different shita. So I said to the guy, Meir Sha'arim, who was selling all these things, so I said, in Yiddish, ich ken him. I know this Rabbi Shechter. And he had no idea who Rav Shechter was. He said, he's a businessman. He says, Lepnach, he's still alive? Because all the other ones from all the Rishonim, the Gaonim. Lepnach, all right. But, so, this is a very important mitzvah. And there are those who want to perform the mitzvah, the hiduro, in its most, how do you say it, most exacting way. And that gave rise, and I say there are two schools of thought. Those who accept the definition, and scientists and poskim, there's no argument, to my mind, that the murex trunculus is the chilazon. No question about it. The only question is, can you resurrect a lost Masorah, even if you've discovered what the source of the cheles is? So the Gemara had a big discussion about it, Parakat Cheles, and apparently there was a market in phony cheles from the indigo plant. So the Gemara is very, very cautious. Be very careful not to use plant dye. It had to come from this murex trunculus, from the chilazon. And you'll see a lot of people in shul wearing cheles on their tzitzis and different types of tying of the knots, not the usual way. I'm not in a position to say what's right and what's wrong. There are those who accept Rav Shechter's psak, even though his Rebbe did not wear tcheles, and in fact his Rebbe's great-grandfather opposed this particular practice. Nevertheless, it's becoming very, very widespread in yeshiva circles. Yes?
Is there anything that you say when you tie the knots?
It's an interesting question. It's even though it's a very good question. Very good question. Anything that you say anything when you're making it tzitzis? It's an excellent question. I'll tell you why. Certain mitzvahs require lishma, that you have to do it for the express purpose of the mitzvah, and particularly when it comes to matzah. When people are making matzah, whether it's hand matzah or machine matzah, they always are repeating l'shem matzos mitzvah, l'shem matzos mitzvah. So in the same way, tzitzis has to be made lishma, and I would imagine and more interesting, because the whole heter for allowing machine matzahs is based on the heter that was given to allow machine-made tzitzis. There were machines apparently that could wrap the tzitzis, and the Achronim allowed that.
That's done today.
Huh?
That's done today.
I don't know. In the mass-produced tzitzis factories, I don't know if they, but apparently there was a machine that was used. Maybe I don't think the machine was used so much in making the knots, but it was probably done in spinning the wool, probably. In all probability, that makes sense. I can't visualize how there'd be a machine to tie the knots. I don't think, but spinning the wool, so that, because tzitzis has to be made lishma. So the heter for machine matzahs was based on the heter that was given to the machines that made the tzitzis. But since they allowed that to happen lishma, Anyway, so
The other part of my question
Yeah.
was, can a woman?
can a woman,
Yes,
yeah, I don't see why not.
because they had all these women volunteering on the Chayalim, when there was this like run on Tzitzit for the Chayalim in
Yeah.
Gaza and other places, they all wanted.
Yeah.
And they were desperate, and there were tons of women that volunteered once they were taught how to do it.
In the same way, in the hand matzah factories, very often it's women who are baking the matzahs.
You know, they can eat the matzah, they can kind of, it's over here, it's not, it's not gonna put on the tzitzis. But in other words, to do
Okay.
preparation.
Yeah, but it's
you have to be able to-
making, there's no specific mitzvah in making it tzitzis. The mitzvah is wearing the tzitzis. So it's an interesting question. Can a woman wear tzitzis? That's a whole other question altogether. It's been reported that Rashi's daughters wore tzitzis. I don't know how accurate that is. I do know, it's a fascinating story, now that you bring it up. There's a woman in our community, a Rebbitzin, who grew up in Fair Lawn, very religious girl, and she wanted to wear tzitzis. I don't know why she told me this once. We were walking along to shul once, and she told me, I would like to wear tzitzis. I would feel closer to Hashem but I know that if word got out that I wore tzitzis, I'd have trouble getting a shidduch. So, but spiritually, she felt it would bring her closer to it. Whatever. Interesting sideline. But in any event, the Tcheles is very widespread, and depending on what your particular Rebbe may have done or what your particular school of thought is, you'll either wear it or you won't wear it. The color, as I say, when it comes out of the Chila zone, it's a dark navy blue. When it's exposed to the air, it turns bright cerulean blue. It's supposed to remind you of the ocean, which then reflects the heavens, which brings you to Hashem. The Gemara is one of the Perushim in the Gemara.
Wally,
Yes.
so tequila is just merely a custom.
No. Techeles is a halacha. The Torah says that one of your strands of your tzitzis should be techeles. The problem was, for thousands of years, we lost the tradition of how to make techeles. Now we have rediscovered that tradition. So the question is, once we rediscovered a tradition that was lost for so long, can we in fact go back and put techeles in our tzitzis? And there are those who say yes, why not? And those who say, well, we're not so sure, and then they don't.
Why would they say? Why would they not be sure?
Well, because again, this became possible in the 1980s when it was discovered with 100% positivity that the murex trunculus is the chila zone, and we can extract it. And there's a whole factory in Israel. There's an whole institute devoted to this, that we could properly make the tcheles today. So if we can make the tcheles today, why shouldn't we?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a position that Rav Shechter holds and others. And it's very widespread in the yeshiva world, both here and in Israel, in certain segments of the yeshiva world, that they wear tcheles in their tzitzis, both on their personal tzitzis and on the talis gadol. On the other hand, there are a large segment of the yeshiva world that would tell you that, yes, we can get tcheles again today, but my Rebbe didn't wear tcheles in his talis, his Rebbe didn't, and they're reluctant to start new procedures in the absence of 2,000 years. So you have two schools of thought, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim, whichever minhag you want to follow, there's sufficient grounds to encourage it. So there's nothing wrong with wearing tcheles, except those that feel that it's not that easy to resurrect a practice that had been dormant for almost 2,000 years.
Wally,
Yeah.
there are Jews who know how to remove the gid hanasha and who eat grasshoppers. So why don't the rest of us do it? Because it's not even resurrecting. It's just learning a method that has been in use for 2,000 years.
Okay, so you have two different schools, two different questions. The gid anosha, if it's removed, you can eat the rear portion of the animal. It's very difficult to remove the gid hanosha. The gid hanosha is embedded very, very deep in the meat. And if you don't pull it out the right way, in one piece, so you gotta dig and you ruin the piece of meat. And this skill apparently is limited to very, very few expert menachrim. That Nikur Gidin is what they call it. And in Israel and certain places in Europe, they do eat that portion of meat because they have expert people who know how to do Nikur Gidin of that particular sciatic nerve. In America, we don't do that. In most of the world, we don't do that. What was the other question? I'm sorry.
The grasshoppers.
Yeah, so the grasshoppers, certain types of not so much grasshoppers, but locusts. Certain type, there are several species of locusts that the Torah allows you to eat. But this Masorah is maintained primarily by Sephardic or Syrian Jews, and Ashkenazim never followed it. It doesn't mean it's not kosher. You could buy chocolate-covered grasshoppers and locusts in Beit Shemesh and other places. People eat them. I remember many, I tell you, 1957, I was in Boy Scout camp, and there was a group of Syrian Boy Scouts, and they offered me a tin, like if I had a tin of sardines, they had a tin of locusts. That was kosher, with a hechsher. But it's not our minhag to eat it. So the fact that there are traditions out there, they are divided by specific communities. There are certain minhagim that the Ashkenazim have that the Sephardim don't have, and vice versa. So eating the gid anosha, if it can be removed, but it's a very, very specific skill that most. If you ever study Nikur Gidin, it's a tremendous skill. When I was learning Yoredeya, so I went to my butcher. In those days, butchers still deveined the meat themselves. They didn't get it from a commercial place. Today, nobody does it anymore. At least no butchers in any of the stores around here. And I watched him. Julius Stern was his name, butcher, on Nagel Avenue in Inwood. And remember that, Howie?
Yeah.
And I watched him, and he was so fast. He was grabbing veins and sinews. I couldn't see half the stuff he was pulling out of the meat. I couldn't see what he was doing. But that was an expert menachir. And to do it for the gid anosha, it's very, very, very deep in the meat. So it's very hard to get it out of the rear portion of the meat. Those who know how to do it, I say, it's limited to a few people in Israel, maybe in Europe, I don't know, but certainly not in America. And again, how many people that you know are training to be menachrim or shochtim? Unfortunately, it's only members of the more right-wing community that are in those occupations. I say unfortunately because it's important to have other people with that same skill and not limit it to certain segments of the community. But that's the reality. Mothers like to brag that their daughter is a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant. My son is a menachir. He pulls out sinews and veins. You don't find too many mothers talking about that with pride. But,
he probably could make more money than the doctor.
Perhaps. But without these people, we wouldn't have meat on our table. And I say, unfortunately, it's limited to one segment of our community that goes in for these occupations. And the training should be very, very precise because it's a difficult skill to learn. Very difficult because you need tremendous eyesight and manual dexterity to see these things that the average, a lot of the veins and sinews are white. They're not, it's hard to see them on a slab of meat. So it's a skill that we have to learn. In any event, those that wear tcheles, tovu aleichem bracha, those who don't, in Herav Yameinu, will all wear tcheles. Have a great day.
Thank you, Wally.
Have a good day, Howard.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you very much.
Okay. So that Jay wasn't on this year. He wears tcheles in his house.
He wasn't on today.
He was not. Usually, I figured he'd be the first one on.
Yeah, but he had something up today.
Good.
Thank you, Mandy.
You're welcome. Have a good day. Eventually. You said that was available.